All right, we are live. Welcome to Remote HQ's Future of Work podcast. Today we have with us Zach Bouzan-Kaloustian. I will hand over and let Zach introduce himself. Zach has got a really interesting background, and we'll dive in with him.
Awesome. Thanks, Kit. Really happy to be here on the first podcast. Uh, as you said, I'm Zach. I'm an operations and customer experience professional, and I've got background working in e-commerce and in cloud hosting, and running teams, that scaled from 8 to 88 people, running 24/7. So really happy to share and have a great discussion today.
That's awesome. And I know we've got a set of questions that we've put up here on the left, as well as Zach's background. Mia and I will dive in. Mia, please fire away.
Yeah, so Zach, I think what might be top of mind, given the new environment that everyone is living in, working from home, you can see my beautiful bedroom behind me here. Um, Given the new remote experience, bringing that to your domain expertise and customer success experience and operations, what do you see is most important with support teams now helping their customers in this new environment? And what shifts do you think have been needed to be made, if not already?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company right now. But if you look at a company that's rapidly scaling in a time like this, you need to have team members who can focus at home. That's really important. We're in the middle of some crazy times with COVID and a lot of Black Lives Matter events going on, and so allowing space for team members to be able to focus and assist their customers, and that I just can't underestimate how hard it is to have things going on at home. So just a ton of focus is probably the top thing that team members need nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think double clicking on what you're saying, the necessity of having flexibility within team members' cultures, knowing that you might have little ones running around the house, a dog might bark in the background. I think it's a great opportunity to bring more humane experiences into the work culture. So I love to hear that you're stating that as well. And another question I have relating more to as customers might be seeking to cut costs and extend their runway moving forward, I envision that customer churn for vendors may become a problem. Do you see how customer support teams are dealing with this, or do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I think it's certainly happening. I think a lot of companies at the beginning of COVID and the situation starting really in March, mm-hmm. Shook a lot of companies. And I know if I were using a SaaS vendor, at a time like this, I might try to take advantage of it just to try to increase margins. I think the top thing for teams, to be able to respond effectively is, what processes did you have in place before COVID? And how did you operate? What was your discount workflow for a customer if they're coming in? Some customers you won't be able to save, and I think at the end of the day, if their financial situation warrants churning as a customer, you just treat them exceptionally well. Like, they probably don't want to have that conversation with you, and if you have that really humanely and just a person-to-person way, then that's going to leave a lasting impression. Mm-hmm. And being super responsive as well, kind of pulling out all the stops. What can you do to save that customer? What can you do to make something work for them? Discounts, free trial, extension, whatever it might be. Hoping that they come out on the other side of the pandemic, in good shape, and they're a customer for life because you showed them how much you care today.
Definitely. And it's funny that you actually brought up trying to do whatever you can to make sure that you keep and maintain that relationship with your customer. You brought up whether it's free discounts or extension of free discounts, or extension of free trials. Have you seen a difference in the working between the two of them? I actually read an interesting article recently of extending free trials if you're about to launch a new product rather than giving a discount. Do you think there's anything psychologically different between the two of them that might result in a different response from prospective and or current active customers?
Yeah, I think anchoring a new customer at a discount probably hurts your business and your economics long term. So, psychologically as well, like if I'm a buyer, whether it be a SaaS product or, even e-commerce, like maybe I'm buying a new watch strap. I've seen a lot of those Instagram ads lately.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of psychology at play, and I think discounting is probably a really hard way to, retain customers because they kind of get addicted to that. I know I've tried some SaaS products in the last couple months as well. I'm trying to remember if I actually went on and subscribed to any. I think I did at least one of them. One of them just ran out yesterday, and I didn't continue using it. It was like $13 a month. It's like, do I really need this? Can I get away with it? But I did get a full taste of the product, for about the last 45 days, which was really fantastic.
That's good. So I think, like you're saying, to capture it, there might be an opportunity for, if you extend free trials to prospective users, they can see and engage with your product. Might not be making the cut of priority needs right now, but say down the road when things smooth out and they have the opportunity to dabble in other spaces, they might remember your tool and hop back on. Is that correct?
Yeah, especially in SaaS. Like if I can, in 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the free trial is, if I can make that a key part of my day-to-day, then it's going to make it easier for the company, whether it's self-serve or if they're working with like a customer success manager, to say, hey, if I took this away, would you kick and scream? And if not, then it's probably not that valuable. But if it's really a day-to-day part of your life and it makes your life or your like a full team's life much easier, then yeah, I think it has a lot of stickiness.
Mm-hmm.
Zach,
Definitely, I think
I've
it works on that.
I have a variant of a question. I think Mia just asked us.
Yeah.
In terms of successful customer support and customer success leaders today, sort of in this unprecedented pandemic, and companies and individuals and consumers looking at their purse strings and trying to figure out, all right, what do we need to cut? What do we need to keep? What do you think are, the successful leaders of support and customer experience organizations? What do you think they are telling their teams in order to, really keep the retention and reduce churn, beyond, some of these tactics that you mentioned, just in terms of, if you think about the internal message from a customer success leaders to its team, the rank and file?
Yeah, I mean, especially in SaaS, I think it has to be, pulling together as a team first and foremost, and getting behind the larger mission of your organization, and that can carry you pretty far, especially in a startup environment where there's tons of different pressures, whether it be financing or customer churn. I think at the end of the day, though, every dollar lost is so much harder to earn. And so I think that the message really is like, pull me, if I'm a leader, pull me in. What can I do to help? Who else do we need in the organization? How do we, save this customer? Knowing that there will be, lost customers along the way for factors that we can't control. I think the other part of it is celebrating like hell when you have a win, big or small, like showing the team, that you appreciate them. And this shift, we're all at home, but it's a big shift for a lot of companies. I know somebody whose sales team the other day on an all hands meeting was saying, who can build us a digital bell, because we want to ring the bell, as we finish out Q2 sales.
That's awesome.
I get it, but at the same time, I think some of these companies, like, you should have had that to begin with. Like, if you have more than one office, or if you have one remote employee, you need these tactics. So people are still learning what this means, and I think a little settling into working from home, as opposed to just an occasional person on their team maybe working remotely. And that's a big shift. A digital bell is an amazing idea for a sales team. It should ring all day long, but you should probably have it, in an environment if you have more than one office to begin with.
I know. I think this is where it gets really interesting as teams have no choice but to go remote, obviously, in the last few months, is small little things that, I doubt any vendor or anyone would think about, right? People, I think, when they think of digital bell, that gong, right?
Yeah.
It's a small little thing, but it's big in terms of culture setting. It's big in terms of sort of the camaraderie setting and all the practices it sets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing is, if you get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the day in an office, you can miss, the gong. So how do you kind of make it evergreen as well? Like, there's some bigger questions that I think are just interesting to answer, whether you're in an office or, in your bedroom working.
Totally. It's how do you celebrate one another while not being together? And then also, another thing I've been interested in hearing is how do you maintain those water cooler discussions that you might just have if you stop by someone's desk and now no desk to stop by, but you log into a quick video call or you send a quick message and then you hop right off. So it's difficult to bring that humane office experience remotely, but I think actually, given your background, I know Wycott has some exciting questions that he'd love to ask you as it relates to remote work and scaling remote teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so switching a little bit on the more generic remote work, one of the things that's always impressed me about DigitalOcean is even years ago, before the remote work trend and certainly before the pandemic, I think DigitalOcean has been a trendsetter in terms of allowing employees to work remotely, or a big chunk of it. I'm curious to in terms of your experience, your team has scaled from a small team to a fairly large team remotely. What are some of the key things that you have observed, and either yourself, your team, or DO has implemented that has allowed you guys to be successful in that scaling?
Yeah, so I basically walked into DigitalOcean in 2014 in January, and I had a team of 8 people working remotely 24/7. And if you do the math, you need basically 6 to kind of be fully staffed, like with one person at all times. And so 8 was really lean. And over the course of 6 years, we went from that 8 to about 55 on the team. And I think thinking remote first in every decision that you make is really important. So let's say even one person was remote out of that 55, then we would still need the same communication style that we would if everybody was remote. And in fact, when I left DigitalOcean, I was the only employee in the support organization who was still in New York. So I was the only one going into headquarters every day. 2/3 of the team was in the U.S. working remotely from their house. And then the other third was working out of our WeWork office in Bangalore. And even everybody on that team, at least one day a week, worked from home. So we had a pretty dynamic environment. And so, I think one is figuring out a communication strategy is super important. For us, some of the relationships that we needed to manage just within the team was from, the customer support engineers to the managers, and that could span time zones, shifts, etc. Within your shift. So who's working today? What are we working on? Who's got what covered? And then within a team, so we had like different verticals of our team working, 24/7. So some people handling like account and billing questions, right? One of your main counterparts, you might never overlap with them, and so figuring that communication strategy out. So doing things like stand-up meetings, very similar to this, where you see everybody's face every day. Written communication and handoffs are super important. And then you need to look at your company culture. Like, are you a heavy meeting culture? And if it doesn't happen in a meeting, kind of face-to-face, so to speak, then it doesn't really exist. Do you write everything in a wiki? And Stripe is kind of famous for being a very heavy text company, and that's just the way that they operate and communicate. So you really need to think about that. And then lastly, and this doesn't really necessarily seem like remote work, but building career paths and helping people believe in what they can achieve at your company are super important. It's very easy to feel forgotten, if you're remote, but you can set the tone for new hires, or if you have a large team today but no career paths, you can build those out. And we were fortunate at DigitalOcean to have a really technical product, and so the breadth that somebody could go learn, all the way down to like programming, a CPU basically, could be really deep. And so we had, over the course of multiple years, over 35 people from our team get promoted into other parts of the organization. And so being really relentless about building those relationships cross-functionally so that can happen, building a career path within your team so somebody can go from, we had different individual contributor or IC levels, so level 1, 2, 3, maybe they start on one track and switch over to another. Like, just making those things really apparent helps people, with their careers and scale your team.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier too, which is that you might be working remotely, but it's different to work remotely than think remotely. And so when you're speaking about the different action that needs to be taken to have a culture that adapts and embraces remote work, what are some of the values that might shift alongside those new cultural norms? Do you see remote teams having values of different items than other teams, or what are some common values that you see within remote teams?
I mean, I'll speak from experience. I mean, we had at DO a really strong employee experience team, and honestly, as an in-office employee, sometimes I felt like they catered to the remotees a little bit more. Even though there's a beautiful office in Soho in New York, and we had lunch and snacks and all those fun things. But for the folks working remotely were branded as remotees, and that was a very strong way to identify. So that really, like, from T-shirts to specific channels in Slack, those types of things, like, really help. Making things equivalent, right? So perks would be one. I saw a company recently that if you have a lease for 12 months or more, or you own a house or an apartment, they will actually send a designer to your house to outfit your office.
No way.
So, yeah,
That's awesome.
Like, I saw this honestly this week, and I was like, wow. Like, so that might matter, right? I think at the end of the day, it is also about the problems you get to work on. So it is about the company. Working remotely is work, right? Or working from home, however you want to say it. It's still work, but obviously being comfortable for me, it's kind of in a quiet space where I'm not too far from snacks myself or a glass of water. And lately, being able to just get outside in between meetings and clear my head has been fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great context and examples of what you guys did at DigitalOcean. Just switching topics a little bit, I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
Zach, you have experiences in both consumer as well as like B2B SaaS. Thinking about today, in the last few months, and what's changed and what's not changed. What have you seen in terms of differences that customer service, customer experience, customer success teams are doing? We've talked a little bit about SaaS, but on the e-commerce side, do you see the same dynamics happening as well, or do you think it's a little bit different?
Yeah, e-commerce support CX has been beaten up during COVID in a lot of companies. If you think about Instacart, for example, like they're hiring, I think, 500,000 shoppers. And I know we were in New York City, and we've since left the city, and we're in Maine now. But trying to get a delivery in New York City, I think is still extremely hard, and it falls on a lot of those kind of frontline teams to bear the brunt. I don't know anything really about their support team, but I have experience, doing some consulting with a DTC brand right now, and their business is absolutely exploded. They're selling food, right, that ships straight to your door. So their business absolutely exploded, and candidly, they were not fully ready for it, and so their actions had to be really decisive to kind of correct for that, and they had to shut off channels like chat and phone and move exclusively to email, because email is really the only channel that can kind of backlog.
Yeah.
And so they're really just coming out of it, or have come out of that backlog. And it's hard to say exactly the impact to their business in terms of churned customers, or people who might not order again in a couple months. But they aggressively hired. I came in to help them with different processes, and so I think there's two camps of these types of companies where you weren't ready for it, and you had to react really quickly. And I've been super impressed, with the team I've been working with on how well they reacted. Or you're kind of set up for this, and you still might get overrun. But kind of like Instacart, you can say, all right, our model works, and we just have to scale it now. For me, a lot of the things that a support team does day to day during quote unquote normal times, need to be doubled and tripled down upon, now. So recently, my wife had to make a return for Athleta, the Gap's kind of answer to Lululemon. So some great products, and she had an issue with a pair of pants she bought, and she couldn't actually get through to their support. But what she found was that their self-service worked flawlessly. And so it's having the multi-channel solutions, about like self-service, working really well to do some of the basic things, and having your team members, a human, interact on the high-value items. Maybe they need to describe how good those shorts are, and that's going to make you purchase, but they don't need to necessarily be there to take a return, because their return process will look at the quality, and their guarantee is so strong. So it's kind of two camps that I've seen: prepared or not prepared. And if you're not prepared, your processes really hurt right now, and hopefully they're getting better for the customers.
Yeah, it sounds like it could cut either way, right? Companies could come out of this stronger, or they could come out of this weaker, depending on what if they're set up for the environment right now.
Yeah, and who knows, right? Like in another 3 months, are we the same, better, ideally, worse? Will people continue to buy food, online and have it shipped to their door the way that they have in the last 3 months, or will it kind of go back to tons of restaurants and not so much cooking at home? I don't know, but that's kind of the fun of scaling.
I mean, I do think that it's such an interesting time, because I use, my wife has always hasn't been the biggest fan of these delivery services, so she's always held off on trying them out. until now, right? And she swears by them now for grocery deliveries, and and she's just telling me last week, it's like, when this whole thing is over, I think we shouldn't even do grocery shopping ourselves. We should just, we have a list has been saved. It's almost always the same items, and
Yep.
just keep on ordering them, right? It's that discovery and that sort of new learned behavior. I think it's such a probably so many more consumers who, whether it's delivery service or other services, that are now suddenly really getting exposed to them, and like, we will have to try it. Um,
Yeah.
so
Where do you order groceries from?
so I think we use Instacart. Uh,
Okay.
so we there's a Stop and Shop. There's a Star Market close by, and they've done a great job. I mean, we've got nothing but good things to say about the experience so far.
Nice. Yeah, we're in Maine, just outside of Portland, which is small, compared to New York where we left, but large. It's the largest metropolis for Maine, and we got an Amazon, Whole Foods delivery yesterday. Like, we woke up and said, all right, actually need some more groceries. It was there in 3 hours, and so I totally agree. Like, there's no going back for me. That would have been an hour and a half, of our trip, or trip to the store. So no going back.
Yeah. Yeah, some of these just they're just forcing functions, right? Environments like this. So, no, that's very cool. The other question, going back a little bit to remote work, is how do you build the voice of the customer in a remote setting? Right? What strengths as a customer support leader do you need to articulate it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is hard, regardless of sitting next to somebody or being thousands of miles away. For me, I look at voice of customer. First, I'll kind of define it. Like, it's what is our customer saying? What is our customer base saying? Either explicitly or implicitly. So explicitly, they might say, "This is broken. Like, I physically cannot check out, or I cannot use your product. Like, it crashes." Or implicitly, they might bring something up to you, and the reality is, okay, it's actually like something really way back in the code, kind of behind the scenes, and we recognize it because we are the product experts. And so I think it starts with classifying those things, and it comes from understanding all the reasons why your customers contact you down to a pretty granular level. And so I'll walk through what we did briefly at DigitalOcean, and it was actually I'll talk about an e-commerce company, so Fab, where I worked. One of our main questions from our customers was, "Where's my stuff?" So we did a lot of drop shipping from individual sellers. We even sold cheesecake in jars, and this woman in Colorado made them. And I remember it was fantastic. I remember one sale, and I think she overextended herself, and there were a lot of "Where's my cheesecake?" questions. But what we built was a system to help train our our support agents, but also to classify the types of questions. So we would have a order inquiry. We called them macros, and it would apply a tag and some text to the ticket, or you could just tag a phone call. And we'd have order inquiry, and it would say it's either late or not late, and shipped or not shipped. And depending on that, we would have a way to track what was happening for the customer. And that fed back into a reporting structure where we were able to say, all right, how many of our customers contacted us for an order that was not late, but already shipped? And so that's good feedback. I think if I'm a product manager, I want to know how many people don't make heads and tails of my order screen. Like, what can I do to improve that overall product experience? So that's kind of how I silo it. How do you make that work and be effective? especially remotely. I think it's making sure you have relationships with all the right stakeholders across your company. I've talked already about product managers, engineering managers, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's design. Anybody really at the end of the day who has their work product affects the outcome for a customer. Logistics is another great one. You need to have really good relationships with and mutually build that program. It's not just, hey, we're the CX team and we're going to put a megaphone up and just talk into the wind. Like we're talking for a purpose. We're trying to improve the overall experience. Hopefully we have shared goals across the organization, maybe of reducing bugs or ship times or whatever it might be. And then you measure it. And we'll go back to something Neil liked earlier. We celebrate the hell out of the wins that we have for the customers so that, down to maybe an individual engineer's work product, they know the impact. Hey, because you made that update, we got 1,000 fewer inquiries, which means that our team could focus over here, or it means that like our retention rate went up, whatever the business metrics are that you're tracking.
Yeah, those are great examples. I think sort of replicating a lot of those, I always think of them as sort of the squishy culture building pieces, right? It's like, it's easy to do in real life in an office, and you sometimes don't think too much about it because it tends to be very organic, even though, it's planned, but it's organic, right? When you move it to a fully remote or quasi-remote setting, you have to think through it very carefully, right? Some of the small little things that seem to be afterthought.
Yeah. I mean, what's really tough is I can have this super tactical conversation, and I've had many of these with somebody on video, and, there's a gap. I can't fully read your body language. Yeah. I don't know what's on your screen. Maybe, hopefully you're not watching Netflix, or maybe you are. Maybe you're that disengaged, right? The hardest part about that is kind of the meeting recap. Normally, if you're in an office, you walk out and you're with that person, and it's just, okay, you can kind of see, but when you just shut off the screen, it's like, I wonder how that landed. And so developing, good habits, like as much as possible, trying to watch somebody's eyes, as much as possible, just asking really direct questions about, how they're thinking about it. And it takes time, like any good relationship, to build. And you got to show up. You got to live up to your word and really communicate well, or all of that's kind of gone for your team.
Yeah. Now, this is great, Zach. We've exhausted our questions. I was just taking a glance at the list. So this is great. You've given us a really nice overview of, support and CX functions, and, before and post pandemic, and interestingly enough, consumer and SaaS. I think that's really fascinating to me. Mia, any other questions?
No, I think you left me with a lot of great takeaways, and hopefully we both won't be leaving this meeting wondering how to go, but picking up your tactics of looking each other in the eye, driving towards that extreme clarity. And I really appreciate the time you took to share more about yourself, what your learnings during this new remote time with both Wildcat, myself, the Remote HQ team, and our broader community as well.
Yeah, no, it was great. These are really important questions, and I think it's not just during COVID. Like, these are questions that span, the years ahead of us, especially as we all kind of figure out the new normal. So I love the product you guys are building, by the way. I think it's really interactive and useful, and so I'm hopeful, that your free trial is going to hook a lot of customers as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate us the inspiration to add a bell feature for us as well. So
yes.
If you find it or build it, can you open source it or share a link with me so I can be a hero to another team?
Absolutely. We will have to bring it back. Mia and I will have to bring it back to the product team and talk about it. It should be easy to implement, but it's an important one.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, Mia and Wycott. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and have a great weekend, and we'll chat soon.
Great.